for the past decade, we've been told a simple story about artificial intelligence. Bigger models, more data, more compute. Progress, endlessly compounding. Every breakthrough reinforced the same belief. Intelligence scales if you just add enough resources. But somewhere behind the scenes, that assumption is starting to crack. Not because the algorithms stopped improving, not because the data ran out, but because the physical world is beginning to push back. One of the most influential figures in modern AI has been quietly warning that the next great limit won't be intelligence at all. It will be electricity, cooling, land, and the infrastructure no one sees when they use a chatbot. Because intelligence may be digital, but it still has to live somewhere, and that place is starting to run out of power. For most of AI's recent history, scaling felt almost magical. Double the compute, and models improved. Add more data, and they became more capable. Increase parameters, and new abilities seemed to emerge on their own. This created a powerful mental model. AI progress as an open-ended curve. As long as the money, talent, and ambition were available, intelligence would keep rising. But that model quietly ignored something fundamental. Every training run happens in the physical world. Every inference burns electricity. Every model sits inside a data center that must be cooled, powered, and maintained continuously. For a long time, those constraints stayed invisible. Energy was cheap enough. Infrastructure scaled quietly. The cost was someone else's problem. But now the scale has changed. Modern frontier models require training runs that consume as much power as small towns. Inference isn't free. It runs constantly, everywhere, all at once. And the question is no longer, can we build smarter systems? It's, can we physically support them? That's the shift insiders are starting to acknowledge. And it's why warnings are emerging. Not from critics on the outside, but from builders at the center of the field. AI doesn't just consume electricity once, it consumes it forever. Training a model is expensive, but running it at global scale is what quietly reshapes infrastructure. Every query triggers computation. Every computation generates heat. Every server must be cooled, powered, backed up, and redundantly supported. Multiply that by billions of interactions per day. This is where the problem stops being abstract. Data centers are already among the largest single consumers of electricity on Earth. Cooling systems strain water supplies. Power grids designed for cities are now feeding machines that never sleep. And the curve is steep. Each new generation of models demands more compute per unit of intelligence gained. Efficiency improves, but not fast enough to cancel out scale. The result is a quiet arms race for power. Whoever controls the most stable, cheapest, most reliable energy doesn't just win economically, they win cognitively. Because the future of AI isn't just written in code, it's written in kilowatt hours. For the individual viewer, this matters more than it seems. The services you rely on, the systems making decisions around you, the intelligence shaping recommendations, prices, risk, and opportunity. All of it depends on infrastructure that can fail, bottleneck, or centralize. And that leads directly to the warning. The warning isn't coming from critics on the outside. It's coming from people who built the infrastructure AI depends on. Jensen Huang has been unusually direct about this. Not about intelligence slowing down, but about power, energy, and physical limits finally pushing back. He helped build it. He understands scaling as well as anyone alive, and that's exactly why his warning carries weight. The message is simple and deeply uncomfortable. We assumed intelligence could scale independently of the physical world. It can't. At some point, adding more compute stops being an engineering problem and becomes an energy problem. A land use problem, a geopolitical problem, a resource allocation problem. And those problems don't scale like software. Power grids take decades to expand. Energy infrastructure is political, local, and slow. Environmental constraints don't respond to venture capital. That's why this warning isn't loud, because it doesn't fit the mythology of infinite progress. It suggests that the next bottleneck in AI won't be who builds the best models, but who can afford to keep them running. And quietly, that changes the power structure of the entire field, from many players competing on ideas to a few entities competing on infrastructure. If energy becomes the limiting factor, the AI race changes overnight. Progress concentrates, access narrows, control shifts away from open innovation and toward whoever owns the physical backbone. The most advanced intelligence won't belong to the smartest lab, but to the one plugged into the strongest grid. For society, this matters deeply. It determines who shapes models that influence healthcare, finance, governance, and security. It determines which nations can deploy intelligence at scale and which must rent it. It determines whether AI remains a broadly accessible tool or becomes an infrastructural monopoly. And for the individual watching this, the implication is subtle but real. Your future interactions with AI, what it can do for you, how responsive it is, how widely available it becomes, will be shaped not just by innovation, but by power availability. By physical limits no app update can bypass. This isn't a collapse scenario, it's a constraint scenario. A moment where intelligence hits the ceiling of the world it depends on. And once that happens, the story of AI stops being about what's possible and starts being about who decides what gets powered. What struck me most about this warning wasn't fear, it was realism. The idea that the future of intelligence may not be decided by brilliance or ambition, but by whether the lights stay on. And that feels like a far more human limit than we're comfortable admitting. If this shifted how you think about where AI's real limits lie, tap like. It helps surface conversations that usually stay buried. Subscribe to become part of The Unlocked, where we explore the forces quietly reshaping intelligence, power, and the future we're building inside. And if someone you know still thinks AI progress is infinite by default, share this with them. Because intelligence may be digital, but its limits are physical. Because the future isn't coming, it's already here.